Good afternoon. My name is Mackenzie.
Hi, my name is Dula,
And I'm Sabrina.
and we're going to be presenting the comparative anatomy of a frog and an earthworm.
So for our presentation, we will be covering the animal background of both a frog and an earthworm. This will include the taxonomy, the habitats, the food chain, as well as the mating of each animal. And then we'll be comparing the anatomy of the frog and an earthworm. And then lastly, we'll be covering the phylogenetic tree and making a prediction on each animal. For the common grass frog, we have the taxonomic classification of the domain Eukarya, kingdom Animalia, phylum Chordata, subphylum Vertebrata, class Amphibia, order Anura, family Ranidae, genus Rana, species Ranapipians. For the common grass frogs, they like to live in grass, gardens, and meadows. And these are typically near shallow bodies of water, such as that of ponds and lakes, and etc. Common grass frogs are native to Europe, as well as the United States. For the common grass frog, it is placed as a carnivore. And in the food chain, we have producers, such as that of grass, herbivores, like grasshoppers, which are consumed then by grass frogs as a secondary consumer, and then tertiary consumers, which consume the grass frogs. For the common grass frog, mating starts around 2 to 3 years old. Mating begins around January and goes throughout the spring. When mating occurs, the male returns to the body of water they were born near. And then, once the male arrives, he sends out a mating call using vocal sacs that draw the females to the pond. When mating occurs, the males climb onto the back of the females, and as the female lays eggs, the male fertilizes them. Later on, once the eggs are laid, they take 2 to 4 weeks to hatch. The reproductive organs for common grass frogs include male and female reproductive organs. For the males, we have testes, vasa inferentia, and seminal vesicle. For the female reproductive organs, we have ovary, oviduct, oviduct funnel, and a uterus.
Now we will be moving on to earthworms. Earthworms belong to the domain Eukarya, the kingdom Animalia, phylum Annelida, subphylum Invertebrate, class Clitellata, order Haplotaxida, family Lumbricidae, genus Lumbricus, and species Terrestris. For their habitats, earthworms live in moist soil up to 2 meters deep. They can be found in fresh habitats on land or even in fresh water. They can be found all over the world, very commonly in forests due to their moisture levels. The moisture helps them survive. The mucus that covers their body is what helps them diffuse oxygen from their surroundings. If they do not maintain their level of moisture, they will dry out and be unable to breathe and eventually die. Ideally, they should live in a place with an abundance of dead organic material. Earthworms could be described as omnivores because they consume both plants and animals, but more accurately, they are detritivores because they consume decaying plant and animal matter. On the food chain, earthworms are considered decomposers. They consume both dead and living organic matter found in soil. They are known to help the ecosystem they reside in by breaking down and recycling the matter from dead plants and animals. as well as the waste products, and returning it to the soil, which in turn fertilizes the soil. Since earthworms are decomposers, they are towards the bottom of the food chain, which also means that they are prey to most animals, but most commonly to birds and other small mammals. Earthworms are hermaphrodites, which means that they have both male and female reproductive organs. They reach sexual maturity 2 to 3 months after hatching. While mating, two worms line up against one another facing opposite directions. During this time, both worms excessively excrete mucus, and when this happens, it's called a slime tube, which forms around their bodies. Each worm releases sperm from its sex organs into the slime tube, and it's then deposited in the other worm's sperm receptacles. The male reproductive organs in an earthworm are testes, testis sacs, sperm vesicles, spermaducal funnel, and vasa deferentia. The female reproductive organs are ovaries, oviducts, and spermaticae. Testes in earthworms are usually in two pairs, which contain spermatogonia cells in the lobules and produce sperm. The testis sacs are present inside fluid-filled sacs. So the testes in earthworms, earthworms usually have two pairs of testes, which contain spermatogonia cells in the lobules, and these produce sperm. Testes are present inside fluid-filled sacs called testis sacs. The testis sacs are connected to seminal vesicles. Earthworms have two pairs of seminal vesicles. Each vesicle is connected to the testis sacs. Spermatogonia cells pass from testis sacs to seminal vesicles, where they mature to form spermatozoa. Spermatic funnels. Two pairs are present behind each testis. Spermatic funnels are folded and ciliated. They connect testis sacs to vasa deferentia. Sperms mature in here and come back to testis sacs, which are then transported to vasa deferentia via spermaducal funnel. The female reproductive organs, starting with the ovaries, are ciliated and folded. They open in the oviduct, which are short conical funnels. They are ciliated. Both the oviducts converge to form a single female genital. Spermatica. Every earthworm has 4 pairs. They are also known as seminal receptacles in which sperm is stored after 2 earthworms mate. Each spermatica is flask-shaped. Earthworms are also known to reproduce through budding and fragmentation. Earthworms can procreate via fragmentation, which is commonly referred to as cloning because it happens when an earthworm splits off a part of its body that then regenerates into a new worm. Budding happens when an earthworm grows an extension from its body, and that extension, also known as a bud, becomes a new worm, which eventually separates from the original worm.
I will be talking about the similarities in the comparative anatomy of a frog and an earthworm. So starting with the digestive system, earthworms and frogs' digestive systems both include a mouth through which their source of food passes into the esophagus, which is another common structure between these two organisms. They also both have salivary glands, a small intestine, and an anus to expel their digestive waste. For the reproductive system, earthworms and frogs also have similar reproductive organs like the ovaries, oviducts, testes, seminal vesicles, and the presence of a structure that acts as the vas deferens. For the respiratory system, earthworms and frogs both experience a form of gas exchange where they absorb oxygen through their skin. They also contain mucus glands all over their bodies to keep them moist for proper oxygen absorption. And they both also have a pharynx used for both their digestive and respiratory tracts. And then lastly, for the nervous system, earthworms and frogs both have brains as well as nerves that help to carry out their sensory and motor functions. Now, moving on to differences in their digestive system, frogs have a stomach to digest their food as well as a large intestine in addition to their small intestine, whereas worms only have one intestine. In addition to this, frogs also have a gallbladder as well as a pancreas to secrete bile and digestive enzymes to help digest the food. Earthworms have structures called a crop and a gizzard, which frogs do not have. Food passes from the esophagus to the crop, which acts as a temporary food storage area, and then the crop mixes the food together, which then transfers it to the gizzard, where it is further churned and mixed. For the reproductive system, earthworms are hermaphrodites, which means they contain both male and female reproductive organs, but frogs only contain one set of reproductive organs, either male or female. Another difference is the vasa efferentia in frogs versus the vasa deferentia in worms. These structures both carry out similar functions, but the main difference is that the vas deferens transports sperm from the epididymis to the urethra, while the vas efferentia connects the testes to the epididymis. For the respiratory system, frogs have lungs to take in oxygen in addition to the gas exchange that occurs through their skin. They also have an epiglottis, which is a valve that controls their airflow. They also have a larynx and alveoli, which increase the surface area to air for gas exchange. Frogs also have a nasal cavity where they use nostrils to take air into their lungs, which is a function that earthworms do not have. And earthworms don't have any special organs for respiration. They rely solely on gas exchange. For the nervous system, frogs have a spinal cord, cranial nerves, and a more complex brain than earthworms. And earthworms have a very simple nervous system, which contains a cerebral ganglion connected to a ventral nerve cord that spans through the length of their entire body. So this is the phylogenetic tree as well as the evolutionary predictions of the frog and the earthworm. You can see that the earthworm is located here since they are annelids, and the frogs are located here on the tree because they are chordates. And this arrow points to the most recent common ancestor between the frog and the earthworm, and the dashes include some of the features of both the earthworm and the frog. So you can see that they're both multicellular. They contain true tissues. They have bilateral symmetry and are triploblasts. The only differences on the phylogenetic tree between them are that earthworms are invertebrates and protostomes, and frogs are vertebrates and deuterostomes. And for the evolutionary predictions, frogs and worms came from ancestors who moved onto land from water, which is why they contain specialized functions that help them survive on land. So, for example, they both use gas exchange to take in oxygen and have mucus glands to keep their skin moist on land. Frogs also develop lungs to use when they are active, and skin respiration does not provide enough oxygen alone for them. Frogs also developed a backbone to support their bodies and help them move around more easily on land. And then this is our references slide, and that concludes our presentation. Thank you.